Welcome to aminacademy.com. Let us do the life stories of scientists in that Galileo Galilei. Galileo Galilei was an Italian natural philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician who made fundamental contributions to the science of motion, astronomy, and strength of materials, and to the development of the scientific methods. His formulation of circular inertia, the law of falling bodies, and parabolic trajectories marked the beginning of fundamental change in the study of motion. His insistence that the book of nature was written in the language of mathematics changed natural philosophy from a verbal qualitative account to the mathematical one in which experimentations became a recognized method for discovering the facts of nature. Finally, his discoveries with the telescopic revolutionized astronomy and paved the way of the acceptance of the Copernican heliocentric system, but his advocacy of the system eventually resulted in an inquisition process against him. Telescopic discoveries. In the spring of 1609, Galileo heard that in the Netherlands an instrument had been invented that showed distant things as though they were nearby. By trial and error, he quickly figured out the secret of the invention of made his own three powered spyglass from lenses for sale in spectacle maker's shop. Others had done the same. What set Galileo apart was that he quickly figured out how to improve the instruments, taught himself the art of lens grinding, and produced increasingly powerful telescopes. In the fall of 1609, Galileo began observing the heavens with instruments that magnified up to 20 times. In December, he drew the moon's phases as seen through the telescope, showing that the moon's surface is not smooth, as had been thought, but is rough and uneven. Now, further we discuss about Galileo Galilei. Galileo Galilei is considered the father of modern science and made major contribution to the fields of physics, astronomy, cosmology, mathematics, and philosophy. Galileo invented an improvement telescope that let him observe the described the moons of Jupiter, the right of Saturn, rings of Saturn, the phases of Venus, sunspots on the rugged lunar surface. His flair for self-promotion earned him powerful friends among Italy's ruling elite and enemies among the Catholic Church leaders. The Galileo's advocacy of a heliocentric universe brought him before religious authorities in 1616 and again in 1633 when he was forced to recant and placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. Galileo's early life, education, and experiments. Galileo Galilei was born in Pisa in 1564, the first of six children of Vincenzo Galilei, a musician and scholar. In 1581, he entered the University of Pisa at age 16 and studied medicine, but was soon sidetracked by mathematics. He left without finishing his degree. In 1583, he made his first important discovery describing the rules that govern the motion of pendulums. In 1589 to 1610, Galileo was chair of mathematics at the universities of Pisa and then Padua. During those years, he performed the experiments with falling bodies that made his most significant contribution to physics. Galileo had three children with Marina Gamba, whom he never married. Two daughters, Virginia, later sister Maria Calesti, and Livia Galilei, and the son, Vincenzo Gamba. Despite his own later troubles with the Catholic Church, both of Galileo's daughters became nuns in a convent near Florence. Galileo telescope and the Medici court. In 1609, Galileo built his first telescope, improved upon a Dutch design. In January 1610, he discovered four new stars orbiting Jupiter, the planet's four largest moons. He quickly published a short treatise outlining his discoveries, Sidereus Nuncius, the starry messenger, which also contained observation of the moon's surface and descriptions of the multitude of new stars in the Milky Way. In an attempt to gain favor with the powerful Grand Duke of Tuscany, Cosimo II, he suggested Jupiter's moons be called the Medicean stars. The starry messenger made Galileo a celebrity in Italy. Cosimo II appointed him mathematician and philosopher to the Medicis, offering him a platform for proclaiming his theories and ridiculing his opponents. Galileo's observations contradicted the Aristotelian views of the universe, then widely accepted by both scientists and theologians. The moon's rugged surface went against idea of heavenly perfections, and the orbits of the Medicean stars violated the geocentric notion that the heavens revolved around the earth. Galileo's trial. Nearly 70s at the time of his trial, Galileo lived his last 9 years under comfortable house arrest, writing the summary of his early motion experiments that became his final great scientific work. He died in Arcetri near Florence, Italy on January 8, 1642 at the age of 77 after suffering from heart palpitations and a fever. This Galileo Galilei's tomb. What was Galileo's famous for? Galileo laws of motion made from his measurements that all bodies accelerate at the same rate regardless of their mass or size paved the way for the codification of classical mechanics by Isaac Newton. Galileo's heliocentric with modifications by Kepler soon became accepted scientific fact. His invention, his invention from compasses and balances to improve telescopes and microscopes revolutionized astronomy and biology. Galileo discovered craters and mountains on the moon, the phases of Venus, Jupiter's moon, and the stars of the Milky Way. His penchant for the thoughtful and inventive experimentation pushed the scientific method towards its modern form. In his conflict with the church, Galileo was also largely vindicated. Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire used tales of his trial, often in simplified and exaggerated form, to portray Galileo as a martyr for objectivity. Recent scholarship suggests Galileo's actual trial and punishment were as much as matter of courtly intrigue and philosophical minutiae as of inherent tension between religious and science. In 1744, Galileo's dialogue was removed from the church's list of banned books, and in the 20th century, Pope Pius XII and the John Paul II made official statements of regret for how the church had treated Galileo. Galileo Galilei was the first to record that the time it takes for a pendulum to swing back and forth independent of the amplitude of the swing, as long as the swing is small. He also discovered that the mass of the pendulum does not affect the swing long as the angle is the same. That means the weight of the pendulum will not affect the oscillation. Galileo's experiment with pendulum, the Galileo observed that the time it takes for a pendulum to swing back and forth is constant for small angles. Galileo observed that the mass of the pendulum does not affect the swing as long as the angle is small. That means long pendulum or short pendulum will oscillate in same time. Pendulum's energy. Galileo observed that pendulum nearly returned to their early height, which demonstrates conservation of energy. Galileo's pendulum and clock. Galileo used a pendulum, pinwheel, and pawls to create a clock. The pawls gave the pendulum is a small impulse each time to swung, keeping it ongoing. Christian Huygens built the first pendulum clock in 1657. What did Galileo's Tower of Pisa experiment prove? But here, it was the Italian scientist Galileo Galilei who performed the famous experiment that proved that the acceleration at which the objects fall is the same irrespective of their masses. That experiment is known as Galileo's Leaning Tower of Pisa experiment. That means the top of the leaning tower, he tried to drop different masses at the same time, and he concluded that each mass hit the ground at same time irrespective of their masses. But actually he tried with a iron ball and feather, but iron ball came first because the feather is affected by air friction. Really, if there is no air, any masses come at same time to the ground. That means the mass is not affected by the gravity of the air pulling. So far we discussed about Galileo Galilei, the father of science. We have done. Please subscribe our YouTube channel.